Okay, shalom, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Josh Sussman from the marketing and programming team at Nefesh B'Nefesh. Despite my background that looks like I'm sitting in Jerusalem, I am this time sitting at my parents' home in Columbia, South Carolina. We're able to put these shows on from all over the world. And now that Israel has opened up and the travel is a little bit more accessible, many of us have gone to see our parents who we haven't seen in 2 years. So I'm very happy to have you all joined us today. We have almost 500 people registered for this session. I've been working with Johnny Gross for quite some time, back and forth on all sorts of different topics and sessions on banking in Israel. He is a very experienced banking professional and has a lot to share with us. The session is being recorded. We will send out the recording and contact information, any resources that are mentioned during the session, as well as the presentation itself. Usually we try to do that in 24 to 40 hours, but as I said, I'm traveling. I will be flying tomorrow, so we will not get this out probably until Wednesday, but you will get it into your mailbox. And with that, please also put your questions in the Q&A, not in the chat. We don't use the raise your hand feature, so you don't have to raise your hands either. But if you put your questions in the Q&A, Johnny is going to do his presentation, which should be about 35 minutes, and then we're going to go ahead and open up for some questions at the end. I will moderate and present those questions to Johnny. And with that, I will pass on to Johnny to go on with our program. Thank you very much.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate it's a pleasure to work with you and with Nefesh B'Nefesh. Good afternoon to I understand most of our people listening are from either North America or Canada. So I wish you a good afternoon. Here in Israel, it's just after 8 o'clock in the evening. And as Josh said in his opening comments, thank God we are really coming out of COVID, or Corona, and hopefully, as of this week, we hope that we won't even need masks. A little bit about myself. I have 30 years experience in banking. I've worked in an Israeli bank. I started my career in an Israeli bank in London. I then worked in the Phoebe Bank in Israel for 7.5 years. And for the last 23 years, I've been working for Mizrahi Tefachot Bank. Mizrahi Tefachot Bank is the third largest bank in Israel. It's the largest mortgage bank in Israel. And therefore, we deal with a lot of foreign residents, Olim Hadashim, and of course, the Israeli public. I consider myself a Oleh Hadash Shashan. I've been here for 30 years, but I still haven't forgotten my English. I haven't forgotten the culture that we all are used to, and also the service that we used to appreciate, and some of us still appreciate in different institutions that we work with. And therefore, I very much welcome the opportunity to speak to and present an introduction to banking to people, because I think we're here, and the organization I belong to, and I'm the head of the English desk in that organization, and I deal with I'm the business development manager, so I deal with most Olim Hadashim and new immigrants and foreign residents that are looking to open accounts or looking to do business in Israel. And we feel it's even a mission for us. We see it as an important part of, we recognize that Israel is a place for every Jew. It's a place for every single person. And therefore we have the duty to encourage people to come and spend time in Israel and to make their life easier. And I know that there's people have experiences which are not always as easy, but I'd like to hopefully show you a more humane and a nicer introduction to banking. So I'd like to look at the first slide here. The first slide is the how do we open accounts in Israel. I'm not actually going to speak about the actual account opening because that's a process, but I do want to speak around the account process. Finding a bank. I mean, people have had all sorts of experience with banking and different banks that they go to. And I always say that the most important thing, banks are, there are many banks in Israel, and many of them have very similar services. They all offer the same type of accounts. They all offer They all are the difference that the part that changes or that differentiates between bank and bank is the service that's provided. And therefore, when you're looking to open a bank in Israel, you must look for someone who's offering that service. And not just the service, also they can empathize with your needs as a foreign resident or a Oleh Hadash. I consider every foreign resident that opens an account who may not yet be an Oleh is definitely, and anyone who's coming into Nefesh B'Nefesh obviously is considering that as a possibility in the future. And therefore it's important to find a branch that can branch and a bank in Israel that actually can look after your needs and can empathize with your needs and give you the service that you require. Now, all the banks in Israel, because of the regulatory issues and because it's become a little bit more complicated to deal with foreign residents and Olim Chadashim, and there are certain rules which are required, all the banks have designated certain branches which can deal with foreign residents and Olim Chadashim. So if you go to Israel and you want to open an account, it's very possible that a branch that you may go into may not be a branch that can facilitate that requirement. And we in Bank Mizrahi have 18 branches that we deal with that can deal with Olim Chadashim and foreign residents. There are 4 international private banking centers. These are really centers which are manned by expats, people who themselves were Olim Chadashim once upon a time, and today they can really offer that service. They can, as I described, they can empathize. All the documentation is in English, which is very important with when you're trying to do financial transactions. You want to be able to understand what you're doing. And the people themselves have been Olim, have come, they've lived in Chutz La'aretz, they have the same cultural backgrounds as you yourselves, and therefore they will be people who will be able to you have some empathy with them, be able to understand, they understand your needs. We also have another 14 branches all around the country which can open accounts. Those are branches which deal also with they will also deal with the Israeli public, but they will have in the branch a number of people who can open accounts for you. And it's important to find those branches, those designated branches, in order to open the accounts there. Also, it's very important when you open an account in Israel to recognize, and here there's a difference. I think it's different to what you may be used to in the US and North America and Canada, and that is that you have, in Israel, we have every account, or at least the accounts that I'm involved with, are what they call multi-purpose and multi-currency. In other words, you don't just open a shekel account when you come and open an account in Israel. The same account can be used for foreign currency, can be used for dollars, can also be used for pounds. And we don't necessarily transfer, in fact, we don't transfer the money unless the customer tells us. So he has, in the same one account, he'll have a subsection with different currencies, and it's one account. Also, you may be used to accounts where you have banks where you have a checking account, and you have an investment account, and you have a deposit account, and you have a loan account. In the banks, in Bank Mizrahi, it's one account, it's different subsections. One of the biggest advantages of this type of account is that if you happen to have money on a deposit and you don't have money in your checking account, then the two things are very much connected. There's a connection here, and people can see one to the other. It's things which can be seen, and therefore there's no one will have an uncomfortable call from their banker saying you have no money in your account because you clearly do, but it's sitting in the deposit. Obviously, just if I relate to the actual documentation which is required for opening an account in Israel, if you're a foreign resident, then you would need to come to the bank with a copy of passport, a driver's license, and if the driver's license does not have the address which you're currently living in, then you would need a utility bill in addition. If you're an Oleh Hadash coming to the bank, you would need to bring with you a Tudat Zahut and a Tudat Oleh. Now, the Tudat Zahut has what's called a sefach, which is a blue paper, an attachment which comes on it with it. And it's important that you have both those documents with you before you come to the bank. I find that with quite a lot of people who are making aliyah, that when they open an account, they come into the country, they come to the airport, and they immediately receive their Tudat Oleh, their Oleh certificate. They don't receive the Tudat Zahut, and they will have to wait they will have to wait a little time in order to get that Teudat Zehut, and they shouldn't necessarily come to the bank until they have the Teudat Zehut, because the bank will require that in order to open the account. Let me speak about the next thing. Why is banking so different in Israel? And one of the reasons why it's different is because, unfortunately, it's done on there's a different model when in the banking in Israel. Banking in the banks you may be used to in North America and Canada may work on a policy where they have no service charges for transactions. In Israel, all the banks work with certain service transactions. It's a different model. They don't charge in other ways, but they do charge here. And it's something you have to get used to as someone who's coming to open an account. There will be charges. The charges are not exorbitant in any way, but they are small charges, and that's the model that they work in. Obviously, as I spoke to, difficult to work in a bank in Israel because it's different language, and that's why you need to go to a designated branch that can work with you in the language that you need. Another issue is that many of you have already got a banking relationship with your banks for many years. You're now coming to a new country, and it's clear that you haven't yet got the same banking relationship with this new bank, and therefore it's the whole process of creating that relationship sometimes takes a little bit of time, and therefore for that reason again, it's important. That's why sometimes people feel the banking in Israel is so different. There's also one other issue, and that is that unfortunately, that as many of you may know, that it's because of the regulatory laws and there have been banks that have had certain fines, and therefore there is a certain element of concern, and the bank wants to open accounts, and they're very anxious to have new accounts. And I can certainly tell you from my point of view that I've been told my CEO is very interested in opening accounts for New Olim. We see that as very much a growth spurt for the bank, and we therefore would be very anxious to offer that service to new customers. If we talk about credit cards in Israel, credit cards in Israel work different, is a totally different proposition to what you're used to. And this is one of the questions I'm often asked about with people. You're used to a credit card where you would normally have a credit card where you would, excuse me, sorry. Excuse me 1 second, please, just 1 moment. Okay, I apologize if there's a little background noise, sorry. Okay, so the credit card that you're used to is normally one where what happens is after a time, you basically have a card which gives you credit up to a certain time. You would normally pay that credit card off through either by direct debit in your bank, or you'll go and you'll pay it off in the post office. That's how it works in most places that I am abroad, as I understand. In Israel, it's a totally different proposition. In Israel, a credit card is more like a deferred debit card. In other words, you will use, if an example here is if a person makes acquisitions, he buys things in the month of January, he will have from the 1st of January or 2nd of January to the end of the month, and then on the next month, on the 2nd of February, he will pay off the payments for all of those acquisitions which he has bought in the month of January, meaning that he's basically receiving its credit in as much as he's deferred the debit, basically. And that's how all credit cards work that way. And automatically, your account will be debited for the expenses you use in that month. And there's something which it's something you have to get used to. It's very much a cultural issue, because here in Israel, most people are so used to credit that it's a different cultural issue, and the way that things had worked in America would not necessarily work here. And therefore, it's very important for someone when they come to Israel to realize that is the way it works. It also means that because the banks are guaranteeing your card, and any payment you use in the month of January will automatically be paid out of your account in the month of February, you will be asked normally by your bank to put some money aside on a deposit in order to cover cover the facility that they provide you in the card, because they can't be sure that if you use your card that they haven't got cover for that card, and therefore they will ask you, basically, if let's say you have a facility of 10,000, 20,000 shekel, they'll ask you normally to put some money on the side to cover that that payment. If we can get to the next slide, Josh, please, then we can carry on. Yeah. Okay. So another issue, and this is again connected to the cards, is buying in installments and its ramifications. This is something which having lived 30 years in Israel, I didn't realize it was actually something which is quite unique to Israel, and I thought this was something which was available elsewhere. But I understand that most countries doesn't have this option. Here in Israel, if you go to buy yourself some sort of dining room set, like chairs and tables, or if you go and buy a large item of electrical item, they will offer you the opportunity of splitting the cost of your purchase in a number of different installments. Now, this is, in other words, not meaning that you won't have to, and this is often done without any extra credit. They normally give it to you free of further interest, and therefore many people take the option of doing so. Where people don't realize is that the full purchase of your price, even though you're paying off over, say, 10 to 12 months, for instance, that will be taken out of your credit facility on your card. So, for instance, an example for this would be that if a person has a card with a facility of 20,000 shekel, he goes and buys an appliance of 15 or 18,000 shekel, he will only have 2,000 to 5,000 shekel left on his credit until he starts paying off that particular item. And that's an important thing to realize, because what happens to a lot of people is they'll take these installments and they won't realize that at the end of the day they have no more credit facility left on their card, and it's something that has to be taken into account. Another question which another point I would like to relate to is how do you protect yourself from foreign currency fluctuations? Now, this is a big problem we have today. Many of you, I've been working in the business for 30 years, and one of the biggest questions I'm always asked by people is, how is it that the shekel is so strong? We all grew up with this idea that and we lived through times when there was hyperinflation in Israel, and therefore we always saw the dollar on the pound and the other currencies as being a much stronger currency, and therefore we didn't see the shekel as being a strong currency at all. Today that has changed, and if I'm looking forward and I speak to my contacts in the Bank of Israel, there's a good chance that we will continue to see. There's a chance, again, I'm not giving any advice here, but I'm just saying there's a possibility that the shekel will continue to strengthen in the next couple of years. And the question is, so what do? We're buying an apartment, we want to buy a property in Israel, and we see our dollars are going down the whole time. So how can we protect ourselves? Now, again, in the bank, I'm not going to go into the actual detail of the different things, but there are forward contracts, and the banks have many different options where they can protect you against foreign currency fluctuations. But of course, in all these cases, you have to take a position whether you think the dollar, the shekel is going to go up, the shekel is going down, and then you have to make that decision. But if you feel that, or if you're concerned, you're buying a property going forward in a couple of years, and you're worried that the shekel may get stronger, there are ways today of being able to fix the rate so that you will not have to take the possibility of the fluctuations. Again, these things are much too complicated for me to explain, but I'm happy to discuss them further. Another problem we have in this year, and this is since many of you are future Olim Chadashim, or many of you may be existing Olim Chadashim, that one of the problems, and this is again connected to my previous point, is if we live in shekels and we're earning foreign currency. Many people are coming here with pensions, and they're now living in the shekels, but they're earning on their foreign income, or maybe they're still working for a company abroad, but they're living in shekels. And again, here we have a big problem, because if the shekel continues to evaluate, the money they have is worth less. And therefore, they certainly have to think about that and how they can overcome that. One of the ways of overcoming it is not leaving all your money in foreign currency. If you have an investment, put some investments into shekels maybe, and that way create for yourself a shekel investment. Or if you have significant funds and you want to buy another property, there's also income from buying a property in Israel, which can also help. And these are the number of ways of being able to generate for yourself some shekel income, which has become a very big issue today. And particularly people who are coming on smaller pensions and see that the value of their pension is going down the whole time. If we can go to the next slide, please. That was the previous one. If we go to forward, please. Okay, we're just going to wait for it to go forward. Okay, right. Okay, compliance. Now, many of you have heard the word compliance. We are living in a regulatory world. It is actually, I mean, the truth is it's important for it to be. The compliance is important to protect us all from situations. It is the way of the world, but it's also important that the things are being organized in a way that we are now compliant, and everyone is taking into account the necessary tax ramifications, etc., etc. But even though it's a necessity need, we need to know how to deal with it. And one of the biggest problems, right, we have with people, and many of you yourselves may have come across this issue, is the issue of making transfers into your existing accounts. Now, today, once upon a time when you transferred money, there were no questions asked, but clearly that's not the case anymore. Now, today, the banker has to ask many questions about two issues, which are the major issues which are normally brought up. One is source of funds. They need to understand what the source of funds, because there are some sources which are considered to be not okay, whilst most sources obviously are absolutely genuine and perfectly right. But the bank has to understand the source of the funds in order to make sure that they're not falling into a problem where they're going to accept monies which may not be totally legal. The other issue, of course, is the issue of the tax, and it's become a big issue about tax residency. I don't want to go too much in detail on that, but clearly everyone is a tax resident in a place where they live over 183 days, and these are two factors which the bank will ask you each time when you're often when you're bringing money into Israel. I mean, the bank may also want to know when you're sending money out of Israel, just to understand what you're using the money for. But these are things which have become a need in today's compliance world. And the important thing is not to see it as an enemy. It's important thing is to live with it and to prepare yourself in the right way in order to deal with it. And the right way is basically having a possibility of both on taking into account both the providing the bank, before you transfer the money, providing the bank with sufficient information that they already have it on their books, and that way when the money gets transferred, the money will go straight into the account. Where the problem often arises is where the customer chooses to send the money before he makes sure that the compliance needs are met, and therefore, and then there can be a delay in receiving the actual money. Many people also have money offshore for many good reasons, but it also provides another level of shall we say, complication, which again can be sorted out. But again, we have to prepare ourselves and make sure that we have enough information, the bank has enough information prior to sending the money over. The last topic I'll talk with, and I can see I've spoken now for 25 minutes, and I do want to give an option for one of the subjects which is not actually mentioned here, which I will mention before I get to online options, is the subject of mortgages. It's not here. I just want to mention it because we are the largest mortgage bank in Israel. I feel it's absolutely necessity for me to mention that point. Of course, today, and I'm going to give it just on very simple ideas. Of course, I was asked a question: Can a foreign resident take a mortgage even though he doesn't have property in Israel, even though he doesn't have income in Israel? The answer is absolutely yes. We have a special department that deals with foreign residents who are looking to take mortgages, and obviously they take into account the income that you have abroad and not the income in Israel. So yes, the answer to that question clearly is you can. But as far as taking a mortgage, and before I do, I just want to say two lines on that. Is normally, and again, I'm talking ballpark here, so please, each situation may be slightly different. On Oleh Hadash, first-time buyer can normally get under the Bank of Israel, he can get a loan-to-value mortgage to up to 70 to 75% of the value of the property he buys. And a foreign resident can buy, and again, these are the laws which have been decided by the Bank of Israel, not by the banks themselves. They can buy up to, he can have a loan-to-value mortgage of 50% of the value of the actual property that he buys. Okay, I just wanted to, on those 2 points. Now I'll speak finally on the subject of online options and Corona. Corona, I started with this at the beginning. Of course, the bank has continued to work. We've had all our branches have been working full-time during Corona. We've, other than a couple of weeks when a few workers were not there, majority of people actually came into the branch and been offering all the services. Obviously, we haven't had, in our international branches, we haven't had the same number of people coming to visit, and we're looking forward to, please God, as things get easier, of getting more people coming to join us. But the bank is certainly been running, and we're now that, thank God, we are really at the end of Corona, and I hope we are at least. We can hopefully look forward to being able to offer the services that the customers require. On that subject, I'd like to just mention about online options. The bank has an online banking app. They have two things. They have the online banking. They have the email, the online banking option, not the app, the on the computer where you can. And this is available. You can. The bank has an atar, has a site which is both available in the languages of Hebrew, English, and French. And we also have an app. This actually at the moment is only available in Hebrew, but it will be, we're working on sometime changing that so it will be available in English as well. But this online banking is an excellent option, because not only can you see, you can use it for information, but you can also send messages, which is the most important thing. You can send messages to your banker. So anyone who opens an account will have direct access to the banker. And by the way, if we're talking about direct access to the banker, that's where we in Mizrahi is a bank where we pride ourselves with what we call the hybrid system. The hybrid system is a system where we, on one hand, we use all the advantages of the internet, but on the other hand, we also have a banker at the end of the day. We find that most people still, even though they like to take the opportunities offered by the internet, they still often, when they're talking about financial transactions, they would like to speak to someone. And every person has a banker that they can speak to. So on the online option, through the online banking, online site, you can actually go in, you have your own account officer, and you can send him a message. And because it's a secure online site, we can actually take instructions on it's not like an external email. External email, we would have a problem taking instructions from, but in a secure online internal email, we can certainly do so. And this is a wonderful way where people can really keep in contact with their banker, especially people I'm dealing today with many people in the North America and Canada, where of course there's such a difference in hours, and it's important to be able to speak to your banker even after hours. We obviously we have call centers as well that can take they work up to 11 o'clock at night, and therefore you can actually speak. Once the branches are closed, your calls will be transferred over to the call center, and you can speak to someone in English. So you have that option, even though the hours are different. Okay, there are many other topics I could talk about, but I think I've spoken for the last 30 minutes, and I think you probably would like to ask a few questions. So I'm just leaving you with my details. As I said, it's Jonathan Gross, Business Development Manager in Mizrahi Tfachot Bank. You have here my phone numbers, both my office number and my mobile number and my email. Please feel free to use it. I'm available most days. I'm an observant Jew, so on the Shabbos I don't work, I don't accept calls, but otherwise I'm very happy to speak to anyone. If you have any questions or you're planning Aliyah in the near future and you would like some advice, I'm very happy. You could email me, you can phone me, and I would be very happy. I honestly feel it's part of my duty and job to really help people. So I'll be only delighted to be of service to you.
Thank you very much, Johnny, for that informative half an hour. I will say that that Johnny is very sincere in his making himself available. I think the fact that he's giving out his cell phone number says something about his commitment to service. You won't get that from necessarily everyone. But he's giving it sincerely, and I know that he's always available. I've even called him up with a question or two here and there. So we do have a number of questions. I'm gonna just moderate them and throw them out Johnny's way, and he can work our way through these as best we can over the next 15 minutes or so. Got a couple questions on is there something analogous to the FDIC insurance that people are familiar with in the States?
Oh, okay. That's a question I'm always asked, actually. I should have actually added that into my presentation. I apologize. Okay, so that's a very good question. The answer to your question is unfortunately not. However, I always say that this expression that when you put the test of the I always forget the English expression, but I think it's the taste of the pudding is the eating, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe an English expression. But basically, it's when push comes to shove, you see whether the actual insurance works. There was a case, and what am I saying? There was a case here in Israel, a bank in Israel. Josh may remember it himself. It was called Bank LeMischa. Do you remember it, Josh? I don't know if you remember it, but it was a bank where there was a rogue investor who basically did some rogue deals and did all sorts of things and caused the fall of the bank. It was a small bank. It wasn't a bank like Mizrahi. It was one of the smaller banks which didn't have a proper system like most of the big banks have. And basically the bank went to Chapter 11. The government came in and not one person in that situation lost a penny. So the answer to your question is yes, no, there isn't an official, there's not an actual official policy, but there is no, the government cannot afford to allow any bank to fall without providing sufficient cover for it. And therefore, when it did happen on the one occasion, no one lost a penny. So I never experienced it, but it's a question which is often asked. And most people feel that live situation and what happened there was a good solution, at least makes them feel more comfortable with that knowledge.
Great. You mentioned fees, which is probably something you're also asked about very often. And as you said very clearly, this is something that many people making Aliyah aren't familiar with. Could you, obviously, you can go through a detailed list of all the different fees, but I have a two-part question collating a lot of questions into one. Can you kind of go over kind of the most common fees, and just kind of throw some numbers out, A and B, do the fees tend to be fairly similar from bank to bank to bank?
Okay. Yeah, I think I should mention that, but Josh, but I'm happy to say that one. The fees in the banks are very, very similar, and that's for one reason alone. The Bank of Israel, who regulates the banks, came into the banking sphere and made sure that all the banks had a regulated, that all the charges were very, very similar. So again, choosing a bank, as I said in my presentation, is not depending on fees, and I'll relate to the fees in a second, because the fees are going to be very similar in all the banks. However, and then coming back to particular fees, there's obviously the one fee which everyone has, which is a maintenance fee, which is holding an account. Every person who holds an account, whether it's a deposit account or they just have put money in the account or whether it's something else, will have a fee. And now the fee is something in the region of, here in Israel, is 6 shekel 80. 6 shekel 80 translates as basically $2 a month. So that's the standard. That's a basic fee. Now the other fees which you may come across are for if you order checkbooks, people still order checkbooks, believe it or not. Maybe many people in America don't do it, and Canada don't do that anymore, but here people still do that. There's a charge for checkbooks, credit cards. These cards I referred to, there's also charges there when you have to hold a credit card. Again, that can be anything between 10 to 20 shekel a month. These are very standard between the different banks. I'm afraid these things. But what I will say to you, and this is something which as a recommendation, is particularly if you come to the bank with a lot of business, let's say you bring your investments and we are in the Middle East after all, and you are in a position where you can try to get for yourself, you can go to your banker and say, please, what are you offering me? Why should I come to you? What will you give me that will make me worth my while to stay with you? And you may find, depending on what you're bringing to the bank, that they are prepared to reduce their fees. And so certainly that's something which is worthwhile, particularly if you're planning to bring most of your wealth to Israel. And that's another subject which I won't go into now, but that's there. Going back to the compliance issue, there's often a great, if you bring more money into Israel, and I find a lot of people often choose to leave money out of Israel, especially if you come with a 10-year tax holiday, there's a lot of advantages of actually having the money here. And that certainly will give you the opportunity to go to the bank and say, look, I'm bringing you significant finances here. I expect better terms. And if you don't, not going to offer it to me, then there are plenty of banks in Israel. And certainly we in Mizrahi Tfachot recognize that, and we prefer to give people a better terms and earn a little less than lose the customer. I mean, the customers, the customer's important to us.
Great. Okay, here's another question that comes up all the time. I can give a very short answer to it. Johnny might go farther on it. People regularly ask, well, why can't I just open an account in an Israeli bank in America, or vice versa? And the very short answer to that is that it's actually not the same bank. You might see a Poalim in Manhattan or a Leumi in LA or Toronto, but by law and federal regulatory laws, those are actually completely and utterly different banks. There's nothing more in common in Leumi in Israel and America than there is between Leumi and Chase.
Absolutely. I would add to that, Josh, that it's sometimes cheaper to send it from Chase than it is to send it from Leumi in the US than to send it to Leumi. We have actually a branch in London, Mizrahi, that's actually a branch. It's one of the few branches that they have, and you actually send money, and it's like a transfer between branches. But that's not. But Leumi, for instance, has a bank in London, and that's totally, as you said, exactly right, Josh. It's totally different. It's not the same. You can't run your account from a branch in even the same bank in abroad. It's a totally different banking system. You can't deposit checks abroad. You have Israeli checks, but on abroad, it's not. So it wouldn't work.
Thank you. That's one of the things about banking I know down cold. Can you speak a little bit to how the overdraft system works here in Israel? It's also something I haven't lived all over the world, but I have lived in America and Israel, and something a little bit unique to my experience.
Okay, so why? Because in America you're not used to having overdrafts, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the truth is that even in Israel, they came a law a number of years ago where they didn't allow you to have a non-organized overdraft. In other words, if a person wants an overdraft, he has to have an overdraft facility. It is now a law. This is going back, and Joshua, you've been here quite a few years. So when you probably came in Aliyah originally, there was you could have had an overdraft without actually having a proper facility. They allowed you to go overdrawn. Today, you have to have a facility, even in Israel. And the facility, again, most banks will want to see some income in order to offer you a facility. Either if you have income coming in, or you have a pension, or you have something that's coming in, so they can see. Otherwise, they have to feel some confidence in the person that they're not just giving them money without getting the money back. I mean, it's a cultural issue, and as anyone who's made Aliyah knows, that in Israel. The Israeli public are so used to living in debt that unless the whole thing was organized properly, there would be a lot of overdrafts, non-organized overdrafts, and therefore the Bank of Israel, in order to protect people from unnecessary overdrafts, which they couldn't deal with, they made the whole situation much clearer. But again, a person who comes to a bank, an Oleh Hadash, who comes and asks for an overdraft, I imagine it's the same like in America. If you have a new banking relationship with a new bank and they don't know you yet, they may feel a little bit, they may not feel totally open to offering the overdraft facility at this point, from day one until they get to know the person. Unless the person says, look, I'm going to put money aside as a deposit to cover some sort of facility. And that's actually what happens with the credit cards. I mean, the facility which I mentioned before, when I was talking about credit cards, many banks will ask the customers to put money aside as a facility because they are basically guaranteeing that money on the credit card, on the deferred debit card, as I called it, and therefore the customer who comes to Israel and is used to an Oleh Hadash who's banked in the US and is used to getting credit cards, he may be surprised when the bank says to him, okay, I'll give you a credit card, but I'd like you to put money on the side. But that's the system it is here. And that is quite a normal request from the banks to give them some sort of, they can sleep at nights knowing that in case you're on your credit card, you incur some large costs, they have something to cover for it and they don't have to come chasing after the customer.
Thank you. You used the word facility again. A couple of people have asked, I think that's either a British term or a translation of a Hebrew term. Can you translate that into North American English?
Okay, so Josh, you may have to help me on that one.
I don't know.
It's basically, okay, so you have, I'll tell you in Hebrew and maybe you can help me on that one. You know, when you go to a bank, you have on your credit card, you have a credit, no, you're allowed to spend up to 10 or 20,000 shekels. How would you describe that? Credit limit, I'm sorry. Okay, I beg your pardon. Limit, okay. Facility is a limit. I'm sorry. I do apologize.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I do apologize to anyone who didn't understand that.
It's hard when not everybody in the world speaks the exact same kind of English.
Well, okay, we won't tell you what George Bernard Shaw said about George Bernard Shaw said, by the way, they said that the Americans and English are divided by a common language. That's what he said.
Can you speak a little bit to the difficulties or lack thereof, or the ease of which people can switch from bank to bank in Israel?
Okay, that's a good question too. Again, the Bank of Israel came into this point as well. Many of you may know that there was a revolution in the telephone companies here in Israel, and the mobile phones, the Cellcom and the Pelephone, and here people move from one to the other. I wouldn't quite say that moving from bank is quite as easy as moving from one cell phone company to another, but at the same time, within the banks, I mean, one of the reasons you certainly can, at any time it's the customer's decision to move from bank to bank, and the thing that often keeps them in the banks is their direct debits. A person comes to Israel, he buys an apartment, he's got his gas and his electricity and his water, and he puts it on direct debits. And often, because it's complicated to move it from place to place, that historically has been a reason why people have often stayed in the same bank. Today, the back offices of most banks can help the customer to move those things over. Credit cards can be moved over. The balances on existing balances on credit cards can be moved over from bank to bank. If you have a portfolio, that can be moved very easily without a cost, by the way, to the customer. So the moving from bank to bank is still something which is very possible today. Absolutely, not just possible. I don't want to say it's absolutely easy, but it's certainly much easier than it was in the past, and it's causing people today to recognize that they have a much greater card in their they have an ace in the pack, if you want to call it that way. Do you use that expression, ace in the pack? That they have an argument. They can use that as a claim against the bank, and they can use it to get themselves better terms. I mean, again, I'm not saying, I wouldn't necessarily advise people to jump from place to place, but at the same time, if you feel your relationship with your present bank isn't isn't up to what your expectations, then clearly you should be speaking to a different bank and seeing whether they can do better for you.
Okay. And can you speak a little bit to the credit system in Israel, how that works as compared to what it might work in North America?
I'm not sure if I understand. Could you explain
credit scores?
Okay, so it doesn't really. Okay, so it's as far credit scores don't. It's not quite as organized as it is in America. I know you have a whole credit scores. Here, it's more relationship with your existing bank. This is actually a problem which I find that Olim Chadashim have. Then they come to Israel and they haven't yet got a relationship with their bank, and therefore they don't necessarily know them for that. Where we do try to help them overcome that is that we, in our international, for instance, by us, we have an international division. Our international division really deals with abroad, and therefore we recognize positions and we when people show us their 1040s and we can understand what their credit, and they can show us credit scores as well, but we can understand how their present banking relationship relates to them, and we can at least try to give them or try to relate to them in as well as we can a similar manner. As far to my best of my knowledge, there is their own credit rating here, but it's not anything on the same basis like in America. So it's more a relationship with the customer over the years. That's how, unfortunately, I mean, I'm sure you've seen that too, that you develop a relationship, and I think it would probably be the same going to any other country. If you went to any other country, you probably have to create a relationship as well.
Okay. And we're going to take another couple of questions. Something that comes up often is the ability or the process of opening an account as a tourist and then being able to convert it upon Aliyah.
Right, absolutely. Sorry, that's just a phone in the background. I apologize. We'll just let that stop. Okay, sorry. So the creating, we often do that. I mean, that's a very standard transaction we do, and that's when you open an account. If you open an account as a foreign resident, which I do for many people when they come to Israel, and we open their accounts for them, they can transfer the same account into an Oleh Hadash with just a few different changes of different forms. There's a number of forms which need to be changed. They will remain with the same number, the same card, everything stays the same. The only thing that changes is the status of the account will change from being a foreign resident, and he will now get the Oleh Hadash status. So again, there's a number of forms which a customer will come, if he has already an existing account in Israel, he would open the account, let's say, and I would highly recommend that. Sometimes it's helpful for people if they're planning Aliyah and they have already a property in Israel, which they already have an account for, is they can use the same account they can go back to the bank as soon as they make Aliyah and they've received their Tudat Zahut and their Tudat Oleh. They go with those documents, and the bank will then just sign them on a couple of new forms relating to their new status as Olim Chadashim, and the account will just be exactly the same account, the same number, and it's just the status of the account will change. So it's actually quite a relatively seamless operation. I mean, it's coming to the bank and just changing it. It's not more than that.
Wonderful, thank you. We're going to wrap up with this one last question. You referenced previously, if you come to the bank with a quote unquote significant funds, you might be able to negotiate or eliminate some of the fees. But there's been a number of questions on how you define significant and what that actually means.
That's a good question. Everything. It's a difficult question because everyone looks at things. Okay, I'll give you an example. An example from my particular business where I work in Mizrahi. And the example here is that, for instance, a customer, we have, as I said, we have 4 international branches, and we have 14 other branches, which are, should we say, these international branches are more, should we call, premium accounts, as opposed to the other branches, they're good accounts, but they're not the same, it's not quite the same level of accounts. in order for us to have differentiation between different accounts, we ask for a certain activity. So, for instance, we will ask for something in the region of something like $150,000, $200,000 as deposits. That's something which is already starting to show certain significance. I don't know. There are private banking, and many banks they will ask for $500,000 and $1 million, but we try to recognize smaller amounts as being significant, hoping that the customer will start with those amounts, and please God, hopefully, if he has the ability to bring more amounts to us, he'll do so too. I mean, we don't want to. We can't offer the same services to everyone because different people need different services, and so therefore we have to allow some sort of an interaction with the bank to give us some sort of a division between the different types of services.
Wonderful. Okay, we have covered a lot of information, we being Johnny, not me. Thank you for your time, your expertise. Thank you all for joining us. I will say that this session will be sent out by Wednesday, along with some contact information. Any of your specific questions we weren't able to get to, please feel free to email Johnny to be in touch with him. We'll be doing some further finance-based type sessions that might be able to get into some of your questions a little bit more specifically over the next few months. So please keep a lookout out for your emails and on our online event calendar. And we look forward to continuing to assist you with these types of questions and any other questions that may come up in your LAI planning and process. Thanks, and have a great day. You can say something, John? I just wanted to say thank you very much for listening. I appreciate. Thank you, Nefesh, for giving me the opportunity to present this, and I'm very delighted that Josh is doing hoping to do some smaller sections on some, because I've covered so many topics, and I know that there are many questions that have not been answered, and I would love the opportunity to answer those too. Okay. Thanks. Okay. And have a great day. Take care. And good evening. Bye bye.